Hey, Nicotine, thanks a lot for your response. It was really thorough and I enjoyed it. And it's interesting that you brought up Plato because I was actually, just before I watched your videos, reading a bit. Um, I just bought this book a few days ago because so often people say things about Plato um, that, he held this or that belief and that it's absurd for whatever reason. Um, when it seems to me that actually all of the theories that Plato laid out in his dialogues, and the fact that he wrote dialogues is significant because basically it means that he wasn't really explicitly adopting the views that he wrote about. He was just laying them out there, spoken by some character that he's inserted into the dialogue for us to consider as readers. Um, so I wanted to read all of his work. I've read excerpts from Timaeus and different dialogues and a lot of the Republic and Euthyphro and the Apology, of course. But I wanted to read all of it so that I could actually give an authoritative response to all these people claiming things about what Plato believed and didn't believe. It's one thing to say what Plato wrote about, another thing to say what he actually thought. I guess that's just a technicality, really, but for fear of putting words in Plato's mouth, I'm going to try to explain how I understand what he was getting at with this idea that there are eternal, immaterial forms beyond the physical world of sensory experience. Um, and, the reason I think it's significant that he separated that world of forms from mathematical objects and understanding and logic and so forth is that for him, human thought, um, human language, even mathematics, was somehow limited. It allowed us to point toward these unlimited eternal forms. Mathematics for Plato was evidence that such an eternal realm existed. And that nature ultimately was number, not mere quantity like we consider numbers today, but numbers for Plato and for the Pythagorean school of thought had some sort of archetypal meaning. They weren't simply quantities of something. Um, Numbers hadn't become that abstract for them yet. But for Plato, what was spiritual and what allowed him to really tap into this realm of eternal forms was the process of thinking. We could say that thinking itself, our ability to not only, write out mathematical formulas, but to actually understand the reason that they are true. And that involves, it's an activity of our mind. It's not just a representation or a thought. It's thinking. That process of thinking is already a spiritual activity. We can say it's just neurons firing in the brain, but that's to take a step into abstraction beyond what I'm actually referring to when I say the process of thinking, the activity of knowing. It's something you experience immediately from the inside out. And so, while I am thinking, if someone were to look in my brain, they wouldn't see thinking. They'd see chemicals and electricity. Um, and it's not that I'm trying to separate the activity of thinking that we attribute to consciousness from the brain. I'm just saying that there's sort of two dimensions to the matter that composes my nervous system. There's the physical dimension, and there is the spiritual dimension, the interior dimension, and not spatially interior, but ontologically interior, like a face rather than a surface, something that is able to see the world and is not simply seen. That already is something immaterial, something spiritual that we interact with every day. And so to say that we don't have access to anything but the material world, I think is incorrect. Maybe you wouldn't want to define or call thinking, the activity of thinking, spiritual. But, to me, because it does provide us with access to forms, access to ideas, to the ability to understand the world around us in a rational, reasonable way, I think that's somehow significant, in a sense that science can't really tell us much about. But this isn't a limit to spiritual sorts of practices and ideas, because, science, as far as I'm concerned, is a method. It's a way of gaining a certain type of knowledge about reality, namely empirical, measurable reality. And so, if we're trying to find out whether something is true or false about the empirical world that we can sense and see and taste and smell all around us and hear, if we're trying to prove something about that realm, of course we've got to turn to science. There's no better method to study the shadows on the wall. Though that's not a pejorative way of describing what science does. It's just sensory perception. I think, as Kant pointed out, and I'm not a Kantian, but I think it's, when we're talking about science and the kind of knowledge that science or empirical observation can have about the world, there is a limit to it. As Kant said, we can't get to the world itself because our perceptions have more to do with what Kant called the a priori forms of the mind, but what we could today call just the result of the particular structure and function of our eyes and ears and the way the nervous system is wired. We perceive what the brain has evolved to perceive. We don't see some independent, objective reality. That always remains beyond our scientific grasp. But I don't think we're limited to science, which is why I don't fully agree with Kant. I think we do have access to supersensible ideas, and Kant's whole project was to deny that we do, and to say that metaphysics and speculation is completely worthless. I don't agree with him. I don't think we can avoid speculating. Just for example, empiricism is itself based on a certain set of philosophical assumptions that are purely speculative. The way that human experience is divided into subject and object, ego and world, such that empiricism becomes possible, is problematic when you really get down to it. It works very well in terms of the pragmatic use that we can derive from it, and that science has obviously derived from it over the past few hundred years. So practically speaking, science allows us to build technologies. It allows us to predict with a high degree of accuracy at least the material world. Not, we can also, practice medicine and gain somewhat of a deep understanding of how organic bodies work. But we can't ever, if you kick a rock, you know exactly what it's going to do. If you kick a dog, it could bite you. It could, go into the corner and cry. It's up to the personality of the dog, which you can't determine beforehand, like physicists are able to determine the motion of molecules and purely material inorganic, the purely material inorganic realm. So science, rather than see it as some sort of metaphysical belief system that's supposed to replace religion or mythology or imagination and art and so forth, I would see it as a method, a mode of discourse, you could say, that needs to take its place among all the other modes of discourse that human beings have developed to rationally understand the world. Now, it's certainly a lot easier to prove something empirically than it is to prove something spiritually, because everybody can read a ruler, and there's no disputing the fact that this pen is 4.5 inches long, or something close to that, because we can measure it. and everyone can look at it, and it's displayed publicly for any normal person who's not blind to see. When it comes to spiritual realities, though, or even philosophical realities, it's a lot more difficult. There's a lot more room to argue, nuance, meaning, and so forth. And our language itself evolved to describe the physical world, and so we're trying to get it to allow us to reach into this non-physical realm of ideas and relationships and processes that it's hard for our language to grasp. The subject-predicate structure of English is inherently dualistic in that you can basically only talk about things with certain qualities. And Aristotle really, his logic is based on getting to the roots of the grammatical structure of our language, more than it is about the structure of reality itself. To get to know the structure of reality itself, we've got to really perform this spiritual activity so that we don't know these forms as representations that we can write down, but we participate in them as processes that influencing us right here and now. And so, Plato certainly wrote a great deal. Socrates, however, who you could say was both his mentor, his teacher, and his his guru, ultimately, never wrote a thing. And Plato has Socrates say in one of his dialogues that writing should be done sparingly because it makes the minds of men and women lazy, and that all of Socrates' dialogues are him trying to find the essence of something by repeatedly asking questions of those who claim to have knowledge, and you always find that they don't know anything, and Socrates is wise precisely because he knows he doesn't know. That's not to say that he's denying the existence of this eternal realm of forms. It's just that our thoughts, our attempt to represent those forms in our language is futile. He still thinks, though, that we must continue to try, because it's that in trying to think these ideas, these forms, they are influencing our behaviors. In trying to think the good, we exhibit behavior that is like the good. It's not the capital G good, every one of my actions, but it's possible for it to be lured by the good. And I think at the end of the day, that's what Plato is pointing at when he talks about forms. Something beyond our ability to fully grasp and comprehend, such that it could be written as a mathematical formula, but something that's still present because we can feel its influence on our lives. Plato talked about Eros as this intelligent force coursing through the universe, compelling it to greater perfection. And as a pan-experientialist, I kind of agree with that. I call Eros experience, or interiority, or the urge that matter has to complexify. And I think that ultimately it is it's drawn toward something and created by something that's intelligent, which implies that it's conscious. Now, as I said about all the other eternal forms, it's not possible for us to really say in English what this intelligence is like. But I think looking at the history of our particular universe that we can measure, at least to a pretty high degree of accuracy, looking at the complexity that exists right now, it is irrational and unreasonable, in my opinion, to assume it was the result of mere mechanism or mere chance. There are various ways of preserving the possibility of it having been mere chance, like that we're just one of an infinite number of universes that popped into existence, and so we just happen to be one of those which did produce all this organization in life by pure accident. But I think that's, whatever happened to Occam's razor. You're going to invent all these other universes in order to preserve your belief that it's mere random mechanism. So I would prefer to start with what we have. We have this universe. We have our own existence as conscious, intelligent beings within it. And then from there, try to understand how that is possible. And when I do that, and I look at our universe, I see evidence of intelligence. Now, I don't want to say I see evidence of design by some sort of anthropomorphic, human-like craftsman or architect. I see an intelligence beyond my ability to comprehend. The creationist sees an intelligence that they believe they can comprehend, because they say they see the machines that it has built, like they see clocks, and that all the parts work together to do what this machine is supposed to do. I don't really know what life is for exactly. I don't believe that it's written in some book I can go reference to find out. I think that trying to find out what life is for is part of our task here on Earth. We've got to live the solution to this problem from the inside out. We can't just look to some tradition to tell us that. And I think understanding, say an organism as a machine is a mistake, and creationists, intelligent designists, and neo-Darwinians and materialist reductionist biologists both agree that organisms are machines. It's just a matter of who designed the machine, a personified nature or a personified deity. And I think that they're both oversimplified options, and that there's a third option where we see, instead of an anthropomorphic creator completely separate from the universe who crafted it from the outside, we see intelligence and creativity as immanent in the cosmos itself. So nature isn't simply matter, if you understand matter as pure extension, mechanical parts randomly falling through the void. There's actually another aspect to matter, an intelligent aspect, an experiential aspect, an emotional aspect that wants to live and complexify and intensify its own experience of itself. And is this all pure speculation? Well, yeah. But I don't think that means, we can avoid doing it. I think human beings have what the psychoanalyst Viktor Frankl called a will to meaning. We can't exist unless we are in touch with an ultimate meaning of some kind. And so, it's just my natural inclination to speculate about these things and to try to at least find the right direction towards what the answer might be, even though I'll admit I don't know if one word of what I'm saying is correct at the end of the day. But it's not a matter of correctness or falsity. It's a matter of being passionately drawn by what I can only assume is the truth, is the good, is the beautiful. So that's just my approach. And so for me, science is a method that takes its place among many other methods, many other forms of experience, ways of knowing, that include spiritual ways as much as artistic ways and poetic ways. And I think that to be human means to be more than just a scientist, though I would never want to sound like I'm attacking science. Scientism I'll attack, but not science. Science is a method I love, and I practice, and I can't stop, soaking in the knowledge which has been gained through the scientific method. But science as a metaphysical belief system, as what basically amounts to materialistic reductionism that says that no other mode of discourse besides science has any validity in terms of giving us true information. That I will attack and reject, because I think it's dangerous at the end of the day. I don't think our civilization will survive if that is the dominant belief. And I think that as much as the dogmatism of religion is something I would want to counter as strongly as most atheists do, I think the core of what religion should be about is not something we can dispense with. Human beings need to live in a meaningful universe. We need a cosmology. We need to situate ourselves in an imaginary, not an imaginary, but we need to use our imaginations to situate ourselves in a meaningful universe. Otherwise, we're going to destroy ourselves, because for me, the universe has a meaning. And unless we are able to participate in that meaning and that purpose, then we end up destroying it. And I think our civilization's adherence to this purely materialistic, capitalistic direction and mythos really is evidence of how living out of tune with the purposes of nature ends up destroying nature and eventually bringing down the civilization. The ecological situation on this planet right now is dire, and I think it's a result of our failing, or it's a result of a cosmology that has failed, which is the materialist cosmology, that all that has meaning and value is what human beings take into their economy and produce and give value, and then outside of that, there's just natural resources to be exploited as we see fit. I think that sort of perspective of on nature, on what the cosmos is destroying us ultimately, and that if we hope to live past 2100 as a species, as a civilization, that it's only going to be because of a complete reimagination of the cosmos, the cosmogenesis that we are a part of. So yeah, thanks for bearing with such a long video, but I definitely like discussing these things with you, because we agree about a lot, and it's a matter between us of taking the next step, and it's so much better, or I enjoy it so much more doing this than arguing against a creationist or someone who is clearly not yet taken the steps that we have both agreed we have to take in order to actually get to what's at stake in our moment in history. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I look forward to continuing the discussion. Take it easy.